Hello and welcome to this video. This is the first video about the Ragozin variation in this course, and the Ragozin starts with these moves. Let's have a look. So this is knight f3, and here white has the fundamental choice between three different moves. I mean, okay, there are some offbeat ones, but three main moves: knight f3, or knight c3, or g3. And after knight f3, our repertoire suggestion is to play d5 for a queen's gambit, and after knight c3, play the move bishop b4, which is the starting point of the Ragozin. So we are basically combining ideas from the Nimzo with bishop b4 with the queen's gambit declined structure with d5. In the Ragozin, white has a choice of lines available, and we have a couple of chapters in this course to discuss them. And this is the first chapter, which is about the move bishop to g5. This is one of the most popular moves, and it's quite a logical one. The bishop is developed on its most active looking square. It's pinning the knight, which makes particular sense here as we have already put the bishop onto b4. So there is no bishop e7 to naturally break this pin. An important point, however, is that after bishop g5, there is a difference between different black moves now. Black basically has a choice now between various systems that are fundamentally different. And we are going with the move h6 in this repertoire. The big point about h6 is that now white's bishop needs to commit itself, take on f6 or play bishop h4. I think a big point here for the h6 move is that white is more or less forced to take on f6, as bishop h4 is not particularly good. The only question after bishop h4 is if black can still equalize or if black is already better. We should establish this first before we look into bishop takes f6. So bishop h4, and now the move that is a problem for white is the capture on c4. We simply take the pawn. And here we see a big difference between taking the pawn now or the move before. We should briefly check this. Black can take this pawn, which is also a fairly popular option nowadays. It transposes to the so-called Vienna variation. And here e4 is a possibility and by far the main move. Here, black cannot directly use this e4 move for a certain tactic, which is possible here, because now e4 is actually pretty awful, because we have g5 and we basically win already. Yeah, bishop g3, knight e4 is a complete disaster. We win a second pawn, the important e4 pawn, and we have immediate pressure here on c3. So this is absolutely unplayable. And this is an important point because e4 is definitely the move that white would want to play ideally, but it doesn't work. And this means he has to resort to other moves to now try to regain the pawn. And in many cases, he won't even manage. So let's have a look at some lines. He can play a3 to immediately force the situation here. We take, and we simply attack now the center with c5. Black can also try a move like b5, but this is a very good and sensible continuation. White now has to be aware that queen a5 is on the agenda, and with the bishop being on h4, there is no natural cover of the pawn with bishop d2. So white will, should he reach this position, probably take on f6 to avoid the queen a5 thing. But we are definitely not in any sort of danger in this position. b6 is a good way to develop our bishop. We will go to b7 and later decide where to put the knight. You can put it onto c6, sometimes go to a5 or knight d7. Oftentimes we play on the c file in such a structure. Bishop b7, rook c8 can be a good idea because here there are some weaknesses to play against. After dc4. White has also tried the check. This is a typical move in the Ragozin. White can play queen a4 almost all the time in the early moves to force knight c6. Forcing this move, knight c6, has its up and downsides. Black gets basically a development move for free, as queen a4 is not so useful for white in itself. The queen is not well placed on a4. On the other hand, the knight is blocking the c-pawn, and oftentimes we want to play c5, which now doesn't work. Oftentimes, it's a good idea for black to simply think of this move as something that you should make use of somehow, like try to play e5, for example, so that this can be a useful piece positioning. Now, white here has tried moves like a3 and e3. We can check them. After a3, we simply capture. And now there's an important move to remember. It's not that intuitive. The queen to d5. This is nice. We cover the pawn with the queen, and we prepare b5 even with a tempo. After a sequence like this, black is a pawn up, and it's absolutely not clear if white has anything like an adequate compensation. We get the bishop to b7. Our development is not bad at all. This is a3. White has also tried e3, trying to get the pawn back now, but bishop d7 is a very useful reply. This is an immediate threat that you need to be aware of. If white is now not observant, then he's hit with knight takes d4. For example, after bishop takes, knight takes d4, this is very awful because the queen capture obviously doesn't work. So bishop d7 is an important resource that essentially, we go back here, essentially forces a queen move. The queen cannot stay on a4. So white usually retreats to c2, after which we play b5. Making use of the pin, we can simply play this move to keep the pawn. And again, it's very questionable if white has enough for the pawn. Something like bishop e2, a6, castles bishop d6. This was a free preview of our anti-1d4 course based on the Nimzo Indian and Ragozin, available on chessable.com. Thanks for watching and see you soon.